My production skills developed quite a bit throughout this project. The main ways they did so mainly having to do with learning how to incorporate both practicality and design elements which were pleasing to the eye. Now, while I discuss this, I'm simply going to have footage of my first photo shoot, the cover photo shoot, playing in the background, so one can get a decent idea of where I started out in regard to all of this. Beginning at the very start of this project, I was extremely indecisive and unsure of where or how to start. There were multiple ideas in my head, of course, but all of it felt a bit disjointed for quite some time. After all, with so many routes to take, it becomes difficult to choose just one. I had a few genres in mind: illustration art, home and garden, and nature magazines, respectively. These were all things that I enjoyed, as well as subjects which could be practical for me to obtain photos for. I'm an artist, so creating my own illustrations was entirely possible. My home is very well kept, and my family spends a lot of time on landscaping, making the house look beautiful, etc., so there'd be plenty to photograph in that regard. I even live relatively close to multiple nature reserves. Therefore, wildlife would be plentiful and far less of a struggle to find than it may be for others. Even so, the multitude of options was difficult. I decided to turn to market research to determine just what it was I should be doing, and came to the realization that home and garden was the best option, as it drew the most interest even from those outside of the target demographic. This was one of my first experiences with market research. It really did help to curb my indecisive nature. From there, I got to work. I drew up sketches and had a vague idea of what I wanted to do with essentially every page from that point on. Oddly enough, due to my unwillingness to choose a genre right off the bat, I'd been exposed to many more different types of magazines than simply home and garden. Therefore, I was able to incorporate conventions from other magazine types that I felt would be a good fit for the home and garden genre, rather than sticking to every single home and garden convention there was. It allowed me to experiment a bit more, and experiment I did. I began with my table of contents and double page spread in InDesign, occasionally creating two or more entirely separate versions of each page. My focus became much clearer, however, when I recognized my limits in regard to InDesign and switched to Photoshop. By that point, I'd experimented enough to fully realize in my mind what I desired all of my magazine pages to look like. However, even so, I created my layouts in a way which ensured flexibility. While I had a great idea of what I wanted the layouts to look like with the photos, I could not guarantee that I was going to be able to get the perfectly fitting photo every time. I had limited time and limited resources. The entirety of the project was done on my own, save for a little bit of assistance from my mother, and because of that, I had to make sure if something didn't work right away, I could make it work. This helped me out in the long run. There were a few titles I formulated which I could not get proper photos for, and other such problems, but the way in which I structured the pages before putting in the photos allowed new titles and such to be easily created without too much of a fuss, which was a godsend. Had everything been extremely specific from the start, given the scope of the project and miserably small budget, it may not have come out as well as it did. Through this project, I learned how to adapt the way in which I went about creating the magazine in order to fit the limitations which I so clearly had. I used the programs I was best at to produce the best product. I ensured everything was as practical and flexible as possible during production up until the final touches, in order to account for time and monetary constraints. Experimenting certainly aided me in my journey as well. Sometimes one doesn't have to have a hyper specific idea right from the get go, as long as the end product eventually gains the focus that it needs to be appealing.